go ahead and get us started. Today, we have the honor to host the Module 4 Road Mapping and Goals in Succession of Who Will Fill My Shoes for succession planning for landowners, farmers, forest owners, and family businesses. This material is based upon work supported by the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, U.S. Department of Agriculture. Any opinions, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this publication are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the view of the U.S. Department of Education. This webinar will be recorded and is posted on the SRDC website along with the PowerPoints and handouts for participant access. Please feel free to ask questions using the chat. The presenters will address them at the end of the workshop. Today's presenters are Dr. Kurt Smith, Assistant Professor of Forestry and Environmental Resources at North Carolina State University, Dr. Rebecca Smith, Associate Extension Professor at Mississippi State University Extension, and Renee, I do not have your intro in front of me. I don't know what happened to that one, but
That's okay.
I can.
I can say it real fast. I'm Research and Extension Specialist for the North Central Regional Center. Well, there it is. North Central Regional Center for Rural Development.
Yes, Family Business Management Specialist, Purdue Institute for Family Business, Department of Agricultural Economics, Purdue University, and that is the intro for them. So as we get started on road mapping and goals, our first presenter up is Kurt. Take it away, Kurt.
I'll go ahead and jump in here. So it's good. Gosh, module 4 out of 5 modules. It's hard to believe that one more of these and we'll be finished with the entire session. But today we're going to take on the topic of road mapping and goals in succession. So trying to select the who, the when, the timing of it, and the how to transfer land, property, and or / business. I was thinking about that title today. I was like, road mapping. I don't think anybody uses maps anymore. It should maybe be GPS or something else, but I don't know anybody using maps anymore. But I think you get the idea for sure and for certain. So obviously giving credit, more housekeeping if you're not already tired of that. But we want to give credit to all the people who have contributed to putting this series together. So we definitely want to identify and thank North Central Regional Center for Rural Development, NC State University, go Wolfpack, SRDC, Southern Rural Development Center, Mississippi State University, Becky's with them, the Institute for Family Business, and Purdue University, which is where Renee is from. So we've tried to go through these things, sort of setting up the framework of what we're going to talk about over the next hour. So just want to remind people of what they probably already know, but succession planning encompasses a lot of things, not just finances and business decisions, but it also involves getting into some of the soft and the hard skills of putting together a plan for your family and business. So how to talk to a family, soft skills, hard skills, trying to decide between an LLC or a trust, those kinds of things. So what we're really trying to do here is to empower owners. And I guess technically we have two purposes here. A lot of people are tuning into this are owners, but I think the majority of them are presenters. So this would be material that you'd want to cover in your own workshops if you take this material and run with it. But we're trying to empower people to go out, make their own decisions, seek out professionals, and to get a lot smarter putting together a succession plan. The authors, you've already met them all. I'm the weak link in the chain. Renee and Rebecca have most to do with this. So with that, a few notes before we begin. The big disclaimer, I don't think anybody out there is an attorney that's coming after us, but if you do, this material is just education. We're not lawyers, we're not CPAs, at least I don't think we are. So we're in the education game. We're trying to make you smarter so that when you go to see an attorney, so when you go to see your CPA, you're going to be well versed in what you need to know to have good conversation, to come up with good outcomes. All right, so this is sort of this slide is really just sort of admonishing. It's really for presenters, things you might want to go over with your group. And then I think you're free to add on to that housekeeping, for your own particular group, obviously. No personal stories, general questions. I think I might have mentioned the last time I was up in my world with landowners, underserved landowners, a certain amount of storytelling has to be allowed or they'll leave. So I allow a little bit of it, but it's up to you to put up some parameters and some speed bumps so you don't lose control of your workshop. Icebreakers, we've tried to include a little bit of an icebreaker with each of the modules. Obviously, they're good because you need interaction and you need to create an atmosphere where your audience is comfortable talking to you. You have some trust with the presenter. I just didn't walk in and start lecturing. And that enables or empowers the audience to be able to go out there and test their ideas with their fellow participants and to sort of get that peer review and feel comfortable doing it. So icebreakers, I think for every section you do are really valuable. This particular one I think is really good because we're all the way into module 4 out of 5 modules, but just having people put down maybe on sticky notes is a suggestion. What are the topics now going into module 4? Most of the material's been presented. What are you a little bit fuzzy on? What kind of questions might you have that we ran through too quickly, or your own personal situation dictates I need to know more about it? So you have them write them down maybe on sticky notes, put them up on the wall, and this becomes the basis of a conversation either after the workshop material, during break, or however you choose to handle it. So we always want to set this up, and I think you will always want to set this up doing a workshop by making sure you define the difference between succession planning and estate planning, because there is a little confusion. For a long time, the vernacular was simply estate planning. People worked up until they died or couldn't work anymore and passed it off. But now with people living longer, succession planning is something that comes into play a lot sooner for most of us that want to retire and are probably going to look at another 20 or 30 years of life. So succession planning is this really almost a subset of estate planning where you plan for the transfer of management and ownership during the life of the owner while I'm still alive. And estate planning is really executing those plans, usually with the guidance of an attorney and a CPA, to transfer your assets and property after, God forbid, you're gone. So there you go. And you'll hear the terms throughout the presentation: successor and incumbent. Successors, just talking about that junior generation, your sons or colleagues that are younger than you. Doesn't have to be younger than you, but the people that you're probably going to hand off to the management and to own the business one day. An incumbent, really just talking about the owner of the operation. So 2 more terms and then I'll stop this. But businesses, entities, they could be farms, LLCs, proprietorships, your corporation, etc. You'll hear that term. We talk about land, we're talking about everything. Forests, I'm a forestry professor. Bare land, we're talking about farmlands and agriculture, vacant land, and all of that, including buildings and barns. So just a little bit of setup there we wanted to cover before we launch into it. So let's see, just one more slide. I guess what we're going to cover today is road mapping, this idea of trying to figure out steps that are involved to getting to your goals, right? So everybody's heard the Chinese proverb, journey of 1,000 miles begins with 1 step, et cetera, et cetera. That's true. You have to take lots of little steps to actually arrive at a goal. Or another metaphor, if you're nautical, you can kind of just change the rudder on a ship if you're crossing the ocean by just a degree or 2. So maybe making a better or worse decision, and you can change your destination by hundreds of miles by crossing the Atlantic. So the quality of your decisions are important, but also taking the requisite steps to get where you need to be are a critical part of succession planning. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Becky.
Kurt, I'm going to talk about some goal setting. Your examples made me think about the how do you eat an elephant? Has anybody heard that one? Right? One bite at a time. Yeah, exactly. So today we're gonna talk about goals in like from the big picture, and then we're gonna walk it down to some details by the end, and you'll have a really nice tool that you'll be able to use or use with your clients. So goals and objectives are important. So they can help us shape where we're going. So goals are like our vision. And objectives are kind of like our mission. That's like how we're going to get there. And goals, we personally, professionally, right there, they encompass all of us, or we can use them, right? I do remember I do a lot of work with goal setting with people because I do financial education. And I remember talking with this young one person one day, and they was like, goals, I just can't get into them. And I was like, whoa, okay, how are you gonna get there, right? So goals and objectives, they give us something to work toward. They help us plant a flag. And while things may change and we may have to replant our flag, right? These are starting points and they can get the process going. So we're going to talk about the different steps in goal setting is in the context of working with succession with farm families. But goals can be financial, goals can be not financial. So thinking about controlling status, reputation, benevolence, and your social capital, your emotional commitment, as well as all of the financial goals that we typically will think of with the business. So discussing goals takes time, so we can't expect everyone in the family to have the same goals. In fact, we understand from research that we're more likely to reach our goals if we have small steps and they're connected to our values. So connecting, like having this discussion so that we understand where my goals are coming from, and then where other players' goals are coming from, and appreciating those perspectives is going to be an important step. So like finding those shared goals and those shared values are going to keep people moving toward the same direction. Another thing that we find that we break down of meeting our goals is if we set things that are too big. So this curriculum has a lot of tools to help families go at this one step at a time. So vision and mission, I think I'm handing off to Renee.
Let's see.
I think maybe that's mine, Renee.
Yeah, I think it's not me.
All
Sorry.
right, I will jump in.
Sorry.
No problem, and I think actually you could do the section better than I could, but nonetheless, vision and mission. So sort of thinking about that, values definitely affect the vision for the land or business. You can kind of see these three bubbles up here, and it really is true. I mean, it doesn't have to be true, but sort of getting in touch with what your family values or what yours are as the incumbent, I guess. So most of my landowners are motivated by, generally speaking, one of three things. They really have sort of an economic, they want to make money, or some of them really want to leave a legacy for their family. Second, third generation. Oh gosh, my great grandfather put this fence post in here, and they're showing the grandkids around every year, all that kind of thing. And then there's also some people that their values sort of center around environment, land stewardship, land care, that kind of thing. So there's probably more values you could come up with, but those are the big three that I experience working with landowners. So how does that translate? So thinking about those values in a real concerted way will help you create something of a vision which will affect your strategy. So if I'm motivated by money, then maybe I'm going to look at different kinds of investment that are going to turn higher productivity for my farm or forest, higher yields. I'm not going to worry about structures that are going to last 100 years. I'm going to do whatever it takes to be expedient to make dollars. That may inform the choices, the strategy I have for my structure by, which sibling or business partner I might want to leave my land to. So you can go down the line with each of those things, whether it's an investment in money, if it's legacy, that's going to affect your vision and ultimately your strategy and structure. So hopefully you get the idea there. Those things are very much tied together to do a good, clean effort at succession planning. So vision versus mission, the difference, the terms, honestly, they get used interchangeably, right? But there is a little bit of nuance to it. Vision, where you want your business to go. So where am I going to, what is it going to look like, my LLC in 10, 15, 20 years, maybe 100 years, if you're sort of a legacy kind of person. Then your mission is what are the steps that are going to get me to that vision? So it may be sort of inculcating in my family, if it's legacy, a great appreciation for the land. It may be working with the grandkids. It may be funding some of my kids to go to agricultural school at the land grant institution in your community. Could be a lot of things, a lot of different steps there. So those two things are very important. And so I want to highlight a little bit of the nuance between vision and mission. So developing a vision, what you want to do, or at least this is one approach. Obviously, I don't think, one size fits all. So you want to pull from our slides and our worksheets and our workbooks what works for you. Things that don't worry about it. But here's some suggestions for developing a vision. You want to have a description of what you want that business or farm or forest to look like years from now. And you want to provide a context for managing those changes that are going to be necessary, the things I have to do to be able to reach those goals that I've seen down the road and on the horizon. So what's that vision going to do? It's going to help provide direction. It's going to help you develop strategies, look for resources, opportunities as they come along. It's going to make you smarter. It's just going to make you smarter all the way around to have that full-orbed sort of vision in mind. Little footnote warning, maybe it has to be rooted in reality, but always focused in the future. I think you want things to be aspirational, but not crazy, if that helps. So there's just a little bit of footnote there. How do I develop a vision? Again, you want to look at what my land or business is going to look like on the horizon, and you're going to ask yourself these kinds of questions. What new activities should we be pursuing? New technologies, new ways of doing old things, changing a crop, changing a forest cover, changing a product. Maybe it's going into a carbon market instead of saw timber. There's just all kinds of possibilities. Also, what are we good at? If half of your family have been growing crops, don't go into forestry. If half your family are foresters, stick with trees. So also, what will make our business unique? Finding niche markets, particularly in forestry, I'll say, has become so critical to surviving. What will be the roles of our family members and our employees in the business? I think I've mentioned probably before, lots of times it skips a generation. Kids have no interest in the farm forest, but grandkids do. They spend a lot of time with grandma and grandpa, and it sort of inculcates and incubates this love of farm and forest and land and all of that. It could be if you're strictly an investment, your kids are moved to California in the high-tech industry, It may be a business partner that you're looking at to fulfill those new roles in succession. And then how does this succession fit into our vision, our overall vision? And what do we want for our family, which is what most people are looking for. Recent Harris poll, I probably have mentioned this before, 90% of us, we assume that we're going to pass all of our good stuff on to our kids, but only 40% take steps to do it. So there's a big disconnect there. So we want to ask ourselves and take the necessary steps for our family as well. So mission, lost my slide number here. Hope I'm not getting into am I getting into somebody else's material? I don't know. Stop me if I am. Mission, the steps that you'll take to achieve the vision for your land business. Sometimes people will actually craft a mission statement. Not necessary, but if it helps you, if it helps gin up, if it helps get the juices flowing, this can be a great thing to do with family or by yourself or with your spouse. They often begin with an action verb. Examples, there's one here from Tesla and IKEA. Where do we get those examples from? Anyway, that's good. So IKEA, to create a better day every day for the life, everyday life for the many people. I don't know. Boy, that's an awkward one for me. I don't know. And I don't like their instruction books. They're very detailed. They're very hard to assemble those things. And Tesla, here's their mission statement: to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. So there's some examples you can kind of play with. You can take out some paper, maybe try to play with that yourself a little bit. So let's see, this might be my last slide. I think it probably is. But here's a handout. There's two handouts, actually. The next two slides, I think, are mine. And these are just tools. So Renee and I we both have sort of separate tools we work with in our respective states. So you're seeing these worksheets, and these worksheets are available to you. You can download these things, and very easy to do. Mine are in a complete book. I think Renee's are too. I'd encourage you to look at both of them and do what works for you. That's all that really matters in this. But these are forms that help you think through your long-term goals, to actually write them out, kind of do a rough draft, and also some of your short-term goals, a place where you can physically write down your vision and mission for your land and business. And then here's a very similar one, another form that will assist you to walk through your goals. Some admonishment here. So not admonishment, that's the wrong word. Your goals really do need to be specific. Otherwise, you're sort of trying to nail Jello to the wall. They have to be time bound. So you've got to know within a month or a year or something, and they have to be attainable. There's no point putting goals up there that are so aspirational you have no chance to actually attain those things. And your goals are based on you entirely. What I plan to do with my family is almost guaranteed to be 100-degree, a complete opposite of what you're planning to do. They could be financial. I may want to provide for my grandkids' college education and cut a 30-year harvest of timber to pay for that. It could be a lot of different things. So it's an opportunity for you to kind of work through that with your spouse, by yourself, or even with your family. So with that, I'm going to pass it back over to, I believe you're finally going to get Renee.
Thanks, Kurt. So yeah, next, we're going to talk about transferring management and ownership. So management and ownership, they can be transferred. They can go in succinct current steps. They can be one ahead of the other. A lot of times in farms and in families, we see that management component transferred earlier than the ownership. A lot of times ownership, whether we're talking about land, farmland, forest, a business, a lot of times that ownership could be passed on upon death, or slowly shares can be gifted during the owner's life. There's a lot of different ways we can go about that. But first, we're really going to dive into that management piece and think about how we can start passing down the management of the land or the farm that we're talking about. So we have 5 steps that can help you. First, it seems really simple, 3 words: select the successor, but man, is there a lot in that. There can be so many people that could be potential successors. They can be family. They can be outside the family. Maybe you've got 10 kids and you're like, okay, I don't know how to pass this on, right? So, but selecting a successor or successors is the first step in your management succession plan. Next, you really want to set that successor up for success. So what we're going to do is create a survival kit. Think about when you were first the owner of the business, when you were first managing that farmland. You know, what helped you? You want to help put those things together for that successor so that they can succeed. Next, we're going to groom the successor. So start bringing them to meetings. When you meet with people about your farm or your business, bring them to those meetings. Have them have a say in what's going on. Introduce them to all of the right people that you do business with. You know, have a transparent conversation with your family about what's going on. Really, all we're doing here is trying to make sure that that successor, when they do take over, is successful. And we allow them to make the correct decisions for them and have all the tools and all of the knowledge to make those decisions. Next, step 4 is promoting an environment of trust and respect. So as we hand over that business or that farm or that forest, there's going to be a lot of sticking and difficult points. A lot of times the incumbents struggle to hand over that management piece. They don't want that next generation to be making those decisions. So it can be hard. There's a lot of value in what that incumbent has built up. There's a lot of legacy, as Kurt talked about. You know, maybe your grandpa, you know, pounded that post into the dirt, right? There's a lot that can be at stake here. But we really want to make sure that we have that open communication. We have an environment of trust and respect. The communication can go both ways. But lastly, we're going to cope with the financial realities of that estate and gift tax. And that's more to play into the ownership piece. But that's something we need to plan for and think about when we're thinking about management and ownership succession. And really, timing is key. I'm working with a farmer right now, and his dad's 95, and he said, "Am I too late? You know, am I too late to start a succession plan?" And I said, "Nope, your dad's still alive. You know, we've still got time. Now, do we want to wait a couple months? Probably not. We need to start like tomorrow, right?" But timing is really, really key in succession. So when we think about, you know, if we do sell that business to the next generation or sell that farm or sell that forest, you know, you have to think of as an owner, do you want to continue your involvement if the new owner asks you to stay on? What I talked about those decisions, right? So if you decide to stay on and help in the transition, how involved do you want to be? Especially if that new owner has significant changes that are going to occur. Depending on what you're talking about, whether it's a forest or a business or a farm, sometimes those decisions can be a little bit too hard to see. And so sometimes as an incumbent who passed on the business, maybe you don't want to stay around, and that's okay. Maybe you want to preserve those family relationships. And so you say, you know what, I'm not going to help with the business side anymore. That's on you now, but I still want to have, you know, holidays together. And that's okay too. But you have to make that decision how involved you're going to be as the past owner if you want to stay on or not. Sometimes we have to sell the business or sell the land in order to retire, in order to have a comfortable income in retirement. You have to think about how much you might need to sell that for. So what financial terms and conditions do you prefer in that case? And what financial terms or conditions are unacceptable to you? So you have to think about all of these things when we're thinking about the sale and the transition of that land or business. So we have this handout for you that helps you to plan for your retirement. It's a really great tool. It's actually from Kurt's workbook, but it helps you to inventory different assets, savings, things that you have. Think about what you want in retirement. What are your goals in retirement? What do you need? And think about inventorying all those things. So it's a good, you know, you've got your assets and then you've also got debts or outgoing things that you can list there to try to start brainstorming about what you'll need in retirement. So I think I will hand it back over to Becky.
Renee. Okay, so we're just gonna keep on going as far as getting closer to our road mapping tool. But thinking about a roadmap as for succession. So again, setting goals and tracking your family's progress through the process. We're going to be thinking about who is responsible for what. making sure that we're getting on the same page, as well as when. When will these transfers happen? What will they look like? So sometimes a longer time frame, if it if it lasts and lasts and lasts, and it's really long, and and these things haven't been talked about, there's assumptions being made that can be damaging. People like certainty, and so be communication. See previous modules on conflict and communication. So all of that's very, very relevant. But we see it come up if these things are not talked about and not articulated. And so, if we have something in our mind, and we oftentimes are assuming that other people have that in their mind, that can get us in a bad way. So we want to have little fewer surprises, is better. People don't like uncertainty. People don't like change. And so being able to communicate about it and put yourself out there is really going to, it may feel uncomfortable, but it will be less uncomfortable if you deal with it than in dealing with issues that come up as a result of not dealing with it. So you want to have both the incumbent and successor involved. It's being communicated with. So one situation that we wanted to point out is if the successor is appointed and in the management role, but isn't an owner, and this takes a long time to transfer the ownership. Sometimes that successor or that junior, it feels punished because they've put a lot of their own equity, their sweat equity, their work involved into it. And they're feeling like they're going to have to buy it at a higher value. So that can be a situation that we want to head off. So roadmap can help us address some of these governance challenges that are going to come up and that we don't even really can't hardly even imagine. And so these tools allow us to talk about things, to think about things that we might not have even thought of. So as roles change, this can be tricky because humans are very caught up in their identities. So like giving selves time to think about what is this going to be like to have the different identity and the different relationship to the family and the family business. So it's not just about changing roles, but also about changing that self-understanding, so that as the incumbent transitions from that leader to possibly taking on a consultant role, and then the successor transitions from no role or managing or consultant and to the leader. So and the incumbent, the senior generation, is the one that initiates the transition process. And so, but in order to do that, they have to realize that there will be new managerial, they're going to have to do this transition. I was in a session doing some estate planning education one time and asked just open up. I typically open up by saying, what are some of the real hindrances, the obstacles that you've faced? And I'll never forget one of the best answers I ever got. This guy at the very front of the room, he had both hands up and he was just so passionate and his heart was in it, and he was just like, I don't want to lose control. And the whole room like really, really got it. So like that's a very real thing. In order to help, again, with helping us get all on the same page and think through who would be a good successor? Where do we want to transfer some of the assets? Is a handout that we have. So this form will help you think about the individual. So for individuals, you'll be considering their age, their heirs, character traits, needs, their life situation. We want to set people up to win. We want to set the firm up to win. And so sometimes we might think like, oh, this would be ideal. There would be this ideal situation, but that isn't what we've got. And so being able to accept what's really happening and maybe have to make some difficult decisions. We just have to take that hard look. But here's a way to slow down and help yourself out to think through these things that can be pretty complex. And for an organization, you want to be considering its mission, values, and conditions for accepting and receiving property. So again, the tools that we have for you are really to help you put what's in your mind on paper so that there can be a shared understanding. And we know that a lot of times what's in our mind, it's just there, but writing it out helps make it real. So writing is that completion of our thinking. And so while it will slow you down to do these worksheets, and there's a plethora of them, it will help you actually make progress. And that's really that's what we're doing here, is trying to help you make progress. Last questions on the governance transition. So thinking about ownership percentage, the different management roles and needs, human resources, business strategies, marketing, and then even as in the weeds is dividend disbursement. So lots to think about. And Renee is going to help us think about, give us some more tools to help us think about the questions incumbents need to face, as well as the successors.
Thank you, Becky. So we like to use this tool with farmers and families. It's very eye-opening when we talk to students who are undergrads in our department. So this quadrant right here is a good handout to use. It's just thinking about the incumbent and how mentally and financially ready they are to let go of that business or land to the next generation. And so when we think about this, you can consider a farm that you know, or your own land, or whatever you're thinking about. But you can think, how financially and mentally ready are we, and how does that affect how fast the succession process goes? How does that affect the decisions that we're making in our day-to-day business? So we could be down in this lower left quadrant, which is stay and grow. So basically, those people are not ready yet for whatever reason for succession, whether they're very young, maybe they're just not there financially. There can be a lot of reasons. We also have well off but chooses to work. When I say that, a lot of people laugh, but a lot of farmers that I work with are there. They could retire if they wanted to, but they'd rather work, and that's okay. Ideally, when we're in that succession process and when we're handing things over, we want that incumbent generation to be rich and ready to go. So we want them to really be able to gift those assets if they want to and if they're able to. And just they're really mentally ready to pass those decisions on to the next generation. We also have exit at the highest price. So these people, for whatever reason, are mentally ready to go, but they're financially not there yet. So they need to sell the business in order to retire, to move on to the next venture, whatever that looks like. But we have handouts on these, but we like to have people kind of circle where their farm or family is right now and think about that. On the other side of that, we have successor considerations. So we need to think about any successor. We need to think about their willingness to join the business or join the farm and their ability. So both of those are very important. One, in my opinion, can be taught more than the other. It's funny though, I like to ask audiences when I'm doing this, which is more important, ability or willingness? So when I asked a group of Christmas tree growers, they said willingness, or they said ability is more important. They said if they're able, that's great. I can motivate them. And I said, okay, if you can find out how to motivate them, I want to know how you do that because that is like liquid gold, right? When I asked corn and bean farmers, which one's more important, they said willingness. We can probably train them on the ability side. But so when you're thinking about your successor, you have to think about where they are in this quadrant. So what if they're interested and able, that's like the perfect successor. You want to define an entry path for them into that business, start letting them do some management and ownership decisions, try to help them find a niche in that business or in that farm or land. If they're not interested but able, you can try to motivate them. Maybe develop a other side business that more speaks to them. We have people who aren't interested and not able. These people aren't ideal successors, as you can imagine. If there's other successors, and if you can maybe compensate these not interested, not able people in some other way, that might benefit the whole business or farm operation. And then we also have interested but not able. For those people, we have to clarify job expectations, maybe consider some outside training, try to get them basically up to speed to where they are more able to join that business. So we have this handout, which is a quadrant for entry and exit of the incumbent and the successor. And so what we do is we have our audience plot where they are now in terms of the incumbent and the exit quadrant, and then the willingness and ability of the successor. And then think about a few years in the future. So 5 or 10 years, a lot of times is what we say, and try to plot where they will be. So it's a good thing to think about. I shared that, our undergrads, they have this warped sense that they're going to go home and automatically start farming and making all the decisions. And a lot of times we like to ask them, well, who's making the decisions now in the farm? And then they step back and think, oh, you know what? My parents aren't even making the decisions. Sometimes the grandparents are making the decisions still. So if my parents aren't even making managerial decisions, how am I going to go back and do that? So it's kind of a reality check for them sometimes, but it really helps to ground us and think about our family realistically and think about our succession process in a way that makes sense for us. So when we think about those goals, Becky and Kurt covered goals earlier. They're very important. We really want to make sure that we find a fit between the incumbent's goals and the successor's goals. If we can get those aligned, then the succession process can move forward fairly smoothly. We want to make sure that everybody's heard in that process, but really the incumbent and the successor are mutually dependent through the succession process. Their concerns on both sides need to be met. The goals on both sides need to be considered. Whether it's, what kind of balance are we going to have between the family and the farm? That could be a goal and a consideration to think about. If there's a concern of a successor, how is there a buy-sell agreement in place? What does that look like? Am I going to have to buy out my siblings eventually if I want to? What if one of them wants to sell? What does that look like? So there's all kinds of different considerations and concerns that each party can have, but we want to make sure that, we're understanding to those and we work through those to try to close the deal to the satisfaction of both of those parties. The reason we say to plan early, plan often, to start the succession process early is because it really does take a lot of time. So research by Zellweger, he has a great family business handbook. He found that intra-family succession, so that's if you're passing on the business to family members, it takes on average 6.5 years. So some people will be under that, but a lot of people will be over that. It can take, 8, 9, 10 years. It can take a long time to pass that business or that land on. If we're thinking about transferring to employees, we're at about 3.5 years. And even if we're selling that to someone outside of the current operation, it can take about 1.6 years. So succession takes a lot of time. So that's why we have all these tools for you. Hopefully everyone on this Train the Trainer workshop is able to go out and spread the word about succession and use some of these tools, whichever best fit for you, and help get those people planning for succession, because it really does take a long time. I know when we share the intra-family succession takes 6.5 years, a lot of people look shocked at us and we say, okay, well, when did you start thinking about succession and discussing it? And a lot of times it makes them step back. Oh, we've been discussing it for a couple years and we haven't made any progress. I'm like, well, that counts. You know, if you're making discussions, if you're trying to plan and start moving that forward and you haven't, it still counts towards that time that we're talking about. So it does take a long time. So we have to start early and have those discussions often. So we've been talking about this roadmap. So this is basically what it looks like. It's basically a chart. It's highly adaptable to whatever situation you have. This is the example in that Zellweger book that I talked about. But basically you start out with your incumbent and your successor, and you think about what age are they right now. So year T is year now. Where are you right now? And then you plot out their ages as you near year T plus 6. People have asked, you know, can we put year T plus, 12? I'm like, sure, fine, whatever you need. As long as you're trying to plot this out and make progress, then I can be on board with that. But we put year T plus 6 just because of that intra-family taking about 6.5 years. So we're optimistic in this example. But you can have a lot of different things under governance transition. Here we have ownership percentage. We can see the incumbent slowly goes down. The successor, in the same step, slowly goes up in their ownership percentage. We can see under board management. So if you have a board for your business or your farm, whatever that looks like, the incumbent transitions from CEO, where they're making all of the decisions, to really the advisor for that business. The successor, on the other hand, they go from being the manager, the person who's making some decisions, to where they're the CEO, they're making the last decision in all of the decisions. We can also think about transitioning these functional responsibilities. So whether it's HR, business strategy, marketing, we've had all kinds of things here. We've had grain bins. We've had, if there's like a hog operation and then there's corn and beans, you can think of a number of different things here. You can really adapt this roadmap to whatever you want. And then we have miscellaneous. So in this case, we're paying dividends to Peter, who is the incumbent, for exiting. So 100,000 year T and 50,000 year T plus 1. Just an example. Like I said, you can adapt this to however it works for you. I'm going to show you the blank one. This is what it looks like in your handout, just so you can actually see it. It's not a tiny little grid on the screen. But we've also had people ask, what if we have more than one successor? And so in that case, we also have successor 1 and successor 2 in this multiple successor scenario. If you get to a point where you're like, I've got 5 successors, I need a different Excel sheet, just let me know. I'm happy to send that to you. I've got that Excel file and I can just send it out. But as you can see, under functional responsibilities in this multiple successor scenario, we've got some blanks, because it can really change business to business, family to family, land to land. It really can depend on what that operation needs. The way I've used this in extension quite a bit is to take a big dry erase board where we are and have each generation have different color sticky notes. And so we list out the different things that we want to transition, right? Each generation gets a color sticky note and they place on that when they think that thing should transition. And when we look at that, we go line by line and say, okay, where are we all and where can we come to terms? Where do we think is reasonable to be? Because sometimes we have people at, opposite extremes of that. We're probably need to be somewhere in the middle. So that's a really good visual where you can take it out into your community and help a family or help a farm really plan that out and have something solid that they can take with them to move forward and try to keep them accountable in this roadmap through their succession process. But that's how it's been used. You can use it any way you'd like. It's just been a really useful tool for us for extension that we've found. We have another handout that you can use, which is a succession planning timeline. It's got a lot of great things that you can fill out here. Next year, the goal is 2, and then in 2 years, the goal is 2, and then you have some blanks where you can say in X amount of years, here is our goal. So similar to the roadmap, really. You're trying to plot out what do we want to do at each point in time. It has other considerations like your annual meeting, advisor meeting, taxes, annual gifting, even if that is possible and part of your business strategy or your farm or land. So this is also a really great handout that you can use for that. So when we think about succession, you've heard me say this multiple times, but really it is about starting early. You know, it takes a long time to transition anything. Um, so we have to start early in that process. Um, Involving the family in those succession discussions is really, really important. Making sure everybody's voice is heard, can really help to move the process forward. Also, being realistic. Some people have 10 kids. Not everybody maybe can be an owner. In other cases, maybe somebody has one kid, and as Kurt said, you know, maybe they're out in California in the tech industry. They're not wanting to come back to the farm, and that's okay. But we have to be realistic and plan accordingly. Um, Also, don't assume. So don't think that everybody has to have equal shares, equal something. It's not realistic a lot of times. You know, we talk about sweat equity a lot in farming. You know, the heir or the successor that's on the farm has put so much into that farm, and it's so much more valuable since they've been there. It's almost a shame to penalize them, making them buy out their siblings and things like that if there's another way around that. So just really think about what would be fair for your family and in your situation. You also need to train your successors and take time to work with them. Um, just like any other industry, we're not just going to hand something over and say, okay, go, and expect them to do everything perfectly. We have to have some training. And then lastly, get outside help. So when you need help, when you're stuck in your succession process, or if you're at the point where you say, okay, we have our goals, we need to talk to an attorney about our business structure. Go get that help and make sure you're moving forward with that. So our last handout that we're going to talk about today is really looking at strategies for succession. So we have ownership, management, we have possible strategies. On the next page, we have governance and our contingency plan, where you can plot out, you know, what you need now, what's going to transition, and then what it's going to look like in the future. So you can start thinking about those strategies to really get you there in succession. So I think with that, we are ready for questions, Carmen.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for attending. We are so glad that you were able to join us today. So, looking through the chat, the only question I have seen is about the materials. And so that's actually something I'm going to share with you now. The center will send out an email to those who were registered with information on how to locate the content that was discussed today. That includes the PowerPoint, the handouts that were also added into the chat, along with the previous session materials that you may or may not have seen or missed. And with that, does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask? Because there are no others
I
in the
do
chat.
see one
Okay.
at the chat. It's not a question, but she does ask for to provide more context on the status and reputation relative to not non-financial goals. So this came in early, so I think this is a really good point to bring up because and then I'm interested to hear what Kurt and Renee will say as well, but while financials are not easy, right? Like, in one dimension, they're easier than other motivators because they're trackable, they're real. Our other goals are they're sometimes they're not even known to us, right? So it could be power, and it's just very different people have different motivations. And I've worked with agritourism operators, and their whole goal was they were educators and they love to bring young people on the farm. And I've worked with agritourism operators that were trying to keep their farm alive, and so they needed to be focused on profit. So really good question about all the different kind of motivations, and then like, how do you do it?
Yeah, I'll just offer most of my landowners in the forestry game. It's not exactly lucrative right now. So most of them are in it for legacy, the vast majority. They're not in it to make a killing. And so, yeah, and I think our slides and our workbooks sort of capture that it's not simply a financial exercise by any means. Being at a university, I do a lot of polls. So with my landowner groups, when I poll the greatest roadblock to people doing succession planning, it's when you get older, they cite family dynamics. They don't want to upset people. And of course, the catch 22 there is that a lot of families really divide and don't speak when there is no plan in place, and they just the incumbent simply goes away, and people have to fight over what's left with no direction, and that's a whole lot worse. And so, also to that same vein, I'm really happy to see Module 5 line up. I think Renee lined these up purposefully. So we're actually going to be planning, how do I plan with a family? How do I get together a meeting with our families? And so that's really I can almost think it might be one of the most sort of seminal or most important modules of all 5, even though they're all important.
I see we have some other questions in the chat. Could you expand on the example of a successor who works really hard and greatly improves one of the farm operations? What is a fair outcome for that person? So I really have a non-answer for this question because it's really going to vary operation to operation and family to family. We've seen what I've seen, I would just say the most common thing that I've seen with farms, when you have that on-farm heir, that on-farm heir is going to be gifted shares of the actual business. They might be gifted the machinery. The land might be in a separate entity where all the siblings get part of the land, or something like that. But a lot of times we want to give the actual operation and the decision-making ability to the successor that was on the farm. It makes the most sense. Most siblings can get on board with that and understand why that's happening, but really it's going to vary, situation to situation. Sometimes there's some retirement assets that can be given to the other siblings. Sometimes there's a house or something like that. There's a lot of different things that we can do, but it's not a straightforward answer, but there are ways to really compensate that person who's given so much to the farm. Alan asked, what is the shortest and optimal amount of time needed to teach this course in its entirety? I think as we have it structured, it's about 5 hours worth of material. I would say it'd be too much to do in one session though. But Becky and Kurt, what do you both think about that answer?
Yeah, I don't have a crystal ball, so yeah, I think you're right. Depends on how much discussion and interplay you want to have. You
Yeah.
could do it all on a Saturday with a lunch in between. You could do it. I've seen some people set it up for a Friday night and dinner, and then they come back on Saturday and they dispose of it that way. So, and I think you can also probably, if you're really good at this stuff, you could make an abridged version of this and
Mhm.
probably cover it in much less. So that's what I got for you.
Sure, and then you got to think about what your goals are, right, with your audience. Is your goal just to put out the material? Is your goal to help operations actually get through the process? So like thinking about timing and how you're interacting with your audience will also play into that.
Yeah, it's smart not to drag it out, at least with landowners where time is precious. So,
Yeah.
we've all been to workshops where they just keep grinding it and saying the same things and repeating, and you don't want that, or you'll lose your audience and lose your interest.
Mhm. We have another question. Who would be an ideal outsider to help? What is a guide to picking an outsider to help? So in our previous session, I believe, we talked about that advisory team and how to choose them and what questions to ask, Tracy. So we'll make sure you get linked to that material, and you can watch the recording as well, I believe, and see how you line that up and which outsiders we're talking about to get some help. But those could be like attorneys, CPAs. We joke about this, but sometimes family therapists, whatever your family or operation needs, feel free
Yeah.
to get that outside help.